Council meeting. I'll just open with karakia. Tuia karunga, tuia kararo, tuia karoto, tuia kawaho, tuia tātou te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, Māori ora ki a tātou katoa. Apologies, I don't think we have any. Is Councillor McNamara there somewhere? So we'll put an apology for Councillor McNamara. Moved. Councillor Turley, seconded. Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We will move to the public forum. We've got two speakers. First up, Noel Bagent. Welcome, Noel.
Morena, tēnā koutou Mayor Tim and councillors. Last Tuesday evening we had our executive meeting of the Golden Bay AMP show, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Golden Bay AMP Association in regard to the grandstand. Item 8.5 on today's agenda, page 21, if you care to look at that. Who could have predicted that three highly qualified and independent building assessors, two specialising in historic building restoration and one engaged by council, could have got it so wrong? The contractor moves in, and now we're shocked by a handful of photos that show 97% of the grandstand structural timber, native timber, needs replacement. However, it is what it is, and I'm not about to query that or aspects of the original restoration budget that may have been overlooked. Instead, I'd like to focus on the reality that faces us all now. But first, I'd like to say what a pleasure it is to be here in support of council staff, so far from the misinformation and aggression of former times. And I'd specifically like to acknowledge and thank Richard Hollier, Richard Kirby and Joe Bywater for their excellent report in front of you today. So much to say that our AMP executive totally agree and fully support all the staff recommendations. On the draft resolution on page 22, specifically 2A, to approve the additional loan funding from the district facilities rate, and specifically point 3A on page 22, fund the upgrade of the car park from the Golden Bay Ward Reserve Fund. And these sources align with categories of similar and current council operatives. A couple of things that I would like to mention, that is the options. Item 4 on page 27 of today's agenda. We endorse option 1 as the only sensible way to proceed. The disadvantages shown in options 2 to 4 are fraught with risk and delay. And for the significance and engagement, item 8 on page 30, the level of significance in all categories is low or nil. And the explanations so clearly articulated, the explanations so clearly articulate the sorry state that we may revert to should this project not proceed. The journey has been long, but we want to see it through to the end. Hence me here today. I think it's important to be here, to be seen, to front up to the issues. And in summary, we, the AMP show, strongly commend you all to vote in favour of those staff recommendations. With a revised completion date of August this year, full code of compliance can finally be issued for the Recreation Centre, which was more or less completed in 2016. And our 125th show in January 2023 can proceed with full fanfare. So thank you for your time. I'd like to express my best wishes to Susan and Dennis in your retirement. And maybe soon I hear Richard Holly, might be his turn next. So thank you again. Ngā mihi nui, kia ora.
Kia ora, Noel. Appreciate you taking the time to come over in person, and thank you for coming and speaking in the public forum. So much appreciated. Next up, not COVID. Next up, we've got Councillor Hill presenting a petition.
The petition is called Opposition to Fencing Off the Western Arm of Port Tarakohe. The petitioner's statement is, if you oppose having this public area fenced off at ratepayers' expense, then please sign this petition so TDC, the Penguin Trust and the Community Council will only take action that aligns with the vision and objectives of the community. And it's been signed by 192 people.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. If you would like to just pass that to Robin. Thank you. Next up, we've got declarations of interest. Are there any declarations in relation to any items contained in today's agenda? If not, we have a resolution in relation to a late item, 8.10, referral report Port Tarakohe, proposed penguin enclosure, which is to be considered at today's meeting. Would someone like to move the receipt of the late item? Move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Turley. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Next up, we have a number of minutes that need confirming, and there are a number of them where there's only certain people who are able to move and second. Helpfully, I have that noted down. So we have the submissions hearing of the Moutere Waimea Reserve Management Plan, Monday the 28th of February. So that could be moved or seconded by Christine, David or Anne. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Ogilvie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. The deliberations meeting on the Moutere Waimea Reserve Management Plan, again, same movers and seconders. Moved Councillor Ogilvie, seconded Councillor Turley. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Submissions hearing on the wastewater bylaw, Thursday the 24th of May. So this could be moved by Trevor, Barry or Christine. Councillor Dowler moves, seconded Councillor Tufnell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. The full council meeting Thursday the 31st of March. Obviously moved and seconded by anyone who was in attendance. Moved Councillor Mailing, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. And the full council meeting Thursday the 7th of April. Then moved Councillor Turley, seconded Councillor Ogilvie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So at this point, we move to a presentation from the NRDA. I think we have Fiona, Sarah Jane Weir, and Meg Matthews. Welcome along, all of you. There may be other people as well, but the other people I can see on the screen. I'm not sure which of you is leading the introduction to this item, but I'll hand it over to whoever is, and we will go from there. Morning, Meg.
Kia ora koutou, thank you, Tim. And good to see you wearing pink on Pink Shirt Day, Mayor Tim. Good morning, everyone. Online, we have two other directors with me. I have Sarah Jane Weir and Marina Hurst-Tristram, and also staff from NRDA, Fiona, Mark Maguire, Tracy and Tony. It's always great to be here in person, so I'm sorry that we're all online. Fiona is going to present what has been a really busy time the last 6 months. We always turn up and say it's been a busy time, but again, it has been a really busy time. Fiona is down a couple of staff members. It's a tight labour market, and the consequences of such a tight labour market mean our staff are attractive to other organisations. And so unfortunately, we have lost some key staff to other organisations. But I'm going to hand directly over to Fiona to take you through the challenges and the successes that we've had over the last 6 months.
Sure, thank you very much, Meg, and hello to everybody. Yes, last time we were here was in December, and we'd reported back essentially on the last 5 months at that point. So I thought today perhaps we could look at what's been happening for the last 6 months and look forward to the immediate horizon going forward. Firstly, if you could move to the first slide, please. Thank you, and that's just the introduction, so I'll move to the next one, please. Just to recap, at our 6 month report, just to recap on targets, we have 45 targets in our SOI. Of those on track at 6 months of 41. The 4 not on track at this stage, directly COVID impact is event numbers and regional events economic impact, although we're seeing a good catch up on that happening at the moment. We are currently reviewing our eyesight model, that's still under review, and we have been impacted by destination management funding, which I might touch on later. Thank you for the next slide. So to look back first, since we last met with you, and next time it'll be good to be in person. And next slide, please. I think it's really important that we just start looking at the economic and recognizing the economic context that we're in terms of the 22 headwinds coming. Obviously, the Omicron picture, had we spoken to you in March, it would have been a worse outlook in terms of numbers of staff at home, but there's still an estimated around about 100,000 people isolated working from home. Inflation, obviously got the budget today, and we've just had the quarterly figures. You know, inflation's high at 6.9%. A 3-year decade, not expected to reduce until late 2023. Our consumer and household confidence is very low, and we have a rocky global outlook ahead for 22 and beyond, with the war in Ukraine, commodity prices, global shipping disruption, and high prices on some key goods. The tight labour market, as Meg mentioned, is affecting all of us. Even I here, I'm from Metrics team, so it's right across the board. And net migration, we will be seeing net migration coming in, but probably more migration going out initially. And with our international flights, they're a little bit slow to pick up, and our visitors returning, really looking forward to that, but not really expecting to see pre-COVID numbers for another 18 months. If you can, next slide, please. And in our own region, we've certainly seen these next COVID waves moving through. We'll all be aware of the supply chain disruptions, the labour skills shortages and costs, the impact the Auckland market has had, and the lack of people about and the spend in our shops and our retailers. And let's not underestimate the mental health issues right across the board that we should remain aware of. Again, in this region, we have the very tight labour market and the 3.5% regional unemployment, at least. The overall growth masks differences. So, you know, we've got an overall positive picture of growth, but that's masking differences both between and within sectors and also across our region, as we saw yesterday from the quarterly figures. There are concerns about the headwinds coming on, but I'll add some positives. We do run a quarterly business survey. There's still optimism. 63% of the businesses answering what we're confident about the Nelson Tasman economy, and 74% confident about their own business. So there are some really difficult situations in there, but there is that level of confidence. We are seeing a reduced level of hesitancy of going out, or HOGO, which is good news for events and activities. And we're seeing and domestic visitor spend somewhat compensated for the international spend drop, although in different sectors. And in our Regional Business Partners Programme, which is a very good activity indicator, Mark, who's on the line, is seeing high volumes of interest, high volumes of business coming to him, and confidence in revenue growth. So if I could turn to the next slide, please. We do have ongoing structural challenges in this region. You may have seen recently the piece on low productivity in the region. We have lower average household incomes, we face workforce constraints, and we have a housing challenge. These we know about, but they're challenges that we need to address and work through as we look at, as we next slide, please. Some strengths and opportunities which we must focus on. So if you turn to the next slide, and we have absolute core sectors of economic leaders which we have growth opportunities in, and we have iconic experiences. We're an attractive place to live and work and invest. And if you turn to the next slide, please. And we know we have some world-leading innovatives, amazing work these companies are doing despite COVID challenges, innovations we're hearing about all the time, and we're seeing them at world-class level. Here's just some examples. And the next slide, please. So I just wanted to do that, to look at those slides just for the context that we're working in. So looking back over the last 6 months, some highlights and issues and priorities we've been looking at. Next slide, please. Firstly, COVID-19. We've needed to maintain as a whole region the adaptive response. And I say whole region because there's been a strong response in partnership. There's been an effective COVID leadership framework group, which Mayor Tim has been co-chairing. We've been supporting businesses through the Regional Business Partners National Network, constant comms and inquiry support, feedback from businesses into our regional groups, and a contact point for businesses. We've run a series of webinar series in partnership with West Coast, Marlborough and the Chamber, with high attendance through that period. We've listened to lessons elsewhere. We had a really good session with the Tasmanian team, for example, who were 6 weeks ahead of us in terms of the COVID rollout, who told us their experience with RATs and their experience with direct information to businesses. We're learning from them. Industry roundtables we've been holding through Project Corkery give us that direct feedback. And campaigns which you've seen, that we've got this, we've got you, stimulating local support. Next slide, please. In our strategy area, we need to, through all this, keep that wider picture. We need to work, some refer to as economic gardening. We need to work long-term and broad, and we need to work immediate response. So in our strategy area, we're still working on that. We focus on the regeneration plan, the long-term 10-year plan. We have been building our business insights and information, which then informs strategy, both in terms of economic stats, but also what we're hearing from business surveys and on the ground. The Project Corkery collaboration has continued to meet. We've been building up the activation proposal for the Blue Economy Cluster, which is a strategic initiative to build collaboration across the whole of the Blue Economy. And quietly, we do put funding submissions in, we support funding submissions and respond to policy and strategy. Next slide, please. In promotion and investment, we worked closely with Marlborough as a whole of Te Tauahu in leading the response to the Kanoa call for strategic partnership fund priorities. Now, this is more about that fund. This is more about just that fund, because the limitations of the Kanoa fund won't meet many of the project priorities we have, but it's about identifying where our priorities are and working with Kanoa as a door into government. As well as the regional investment priorities we're proposing, we've also been connecting with businesses who are likely to be a match to that fund, and still working through some of those. And sometimes when we think there's no investment, we must also remember the investment that comes directly into businesses. The Regional Business Partners Programme is a direct sort of investment into businesses. And as you're aware, the Science Tech Precinct development is at planning stage, and we're working with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise in developing a proposition to bring science tech investment into the region. And you may see regularly we maintain a strong media profile. Next slide, please. I just wanted to focus on a few examples. The Regional Business Partners Programme, Mark's on the call. Over the period, there's 76 businesses actively engaged year to date. This is the programme for the whole of Te Tauahu. It's roughly split 30-30-30 across Tasman, Nelson and Marlborough. Seeing further 150 inquiries through August lockdown, and that level of funding approved through RBP for the year to date at over 630,000. In addition to the funding and the Callaghan funding is the lean workshops that are run, and a big piece of work this last 6 months has been doing the major bid for the continuation of the programme with NRDA for the next 5 years. In the Pick Nelson campaign, you may have seen that great coverage in the media with that. Over 2,600 businesses registered. That's been a great partnership. It's in its second year, which you'll be aware, refining the model this year. So NRDA in the project management role, MSD at the back end role, and the industry funded the marketing. So really good partnership model, which we can bring out each year as it's needed. And I'd like to mention our education to employment. This is, and I've mentioned this before, this is long game working with our schools and bringing on our future skills workforce. And Ange Campbell, who's our education employment broker, works with 11 schools across the region. Some recent events have been great interaction, bringing school kids out into the industries. We've had an aquaculture one recently. Last week we'd had hospitality, and yesterday Andrew was out with horticulture businesses in the region and school kids to inspire them into regional careers. So I'd like to particularly thank yesterday Golden Bay Fruit, Plant and Food, Motueka, for being involved with that. Next slide, please. And through the Innovation CoLab, we have an innovation program. This includes programs such as Co-Starters in food and beverage and IT, profiling companies through Innovation Nation, an IT sector event series. Creative HQ is a certificate of applied innovation, which we're about to run for the second time with some sponsorship from one of the companies. And again, we're looking at our Oceans cluster and innovation in that area. Next slide, please. This next slide, I try to fit it all onto one slide in terms of what's been going on in the visitor economies. Tracy's been very busy with her team. Just to pick out a couple of items there, Destination Management Plan is in year one of its rollout. The focus of that, which we've spoken to you before about, is that longer term sustainable approach to tourism. The high value tourists, and I don't mean high value in how much they spend, but how they interact with the region and what they take from the region. As you're aware, the award was won late last year for the first zero carbon itinerary. We've still got 27 businesses in that itinerary, and now working to take that from strength to strength. Do face challenges in terms of the increased cost of carbon credits, which Tracy's now working through with Tourism Ministry Aotearoa and businesses to look at how we address that. We've also obviously had a very, very busy period, unfortunately, of event cancellations and reschedules. The rescheduling and cancellation takes a huge amount of time to work with the operators to encourage them to be rescheduled. We've got good news coming on that front. The We've Got You campaign, which I mentioned earlier, really is encouraging that buy, support local. And the 100 Ways campaign was highly successful. It was a partnership also rolled out with Wellington Airport. And you may have been through the airport over the Christmas, January school holiday periods and seen the very large display there. We've now completed a Te Tauahu cycling event strategy, which helps us support more cycling and mountain biking events in the region, and very strong domestic media coverage and conferences being secured. Next slide, please. And just to move through these, in terms of the We've Got You, over a million reach on social media for We've Got You, and that's just some images of the Pick Nelson campaign. Next slide, please. And again, at Wellington Airport, the reach was over 570,000 people across the 2 months, with 8,000 through the terminal each day. And we had very strong positive feedback on that. And again, the 100 Ways at over 90,000 views, and the level of Facebook feeds, it's the reach that these achieve. You might have seen yesterday the latest New Zealand Get Lost magazine, a really good profile on the Nelson Tasman region, combining the Nissan promotion of the Leaf with the zero carbon strategy. What's interesting with that one is behind the scenes, it's actually over a year since the interactions and planning for that started with Laura and Tracy at an international media event, connecting in with a writer who connected in with the Nissan, and our team worked with them. Twice it was cancelled and rescheduled for COVID, and finally the tour happened. Really great profile if you get a chance to look at it. Really delighted with that. Next slide, please. So just looking forward now on the current horizon. Next slide, please. So again, working under keeping going in that strategic direction with the regeneration plan, looking at the activation of the Blue Economy cluster, and really looking forward to sharing more of that with you. You might have seen in the recent media coverage of the productivity project, one of the pieces of work we've been doing in terms of an increased knowledge and understanding of the economy is diving deeper into how the productivity is structured in the region, and highlighting that we do have a $1.67 billion productivity gap in the region. It was calculated if we are doing slightly better in terms of our improvement than the rest of the country, but from the base we're on, if we carry on exactly as we are, it will take 145 years to reach New Zealand average. So this is the importance of this, is us recognizing the scale of it and recognizing the importance that we do things a bit differently, and the importance of innovation into our businesses and encouraging support for innovation into our firms. And a piece of work we're doing now is working with who are equivalent of regional frontier firms in the region, looking at what they're doing and taking what we can transfer, what transferable lessons from that. This is not these are, it's sort of common sense, isn't it, in a way, but it's the importance is recognizing the scale and recognizing the importance when we look at these investment funds from Kainoa, the importance that it's about innovation and supporting business growth through what is difficult times, and learning from these businesses that are really performing in the top few percent internationally. We're just keeping going with our business survey and ongoing news. If you could stay on that side for a second, please. As I mentioned earlier, we're developing the investment proposition for science and tech and partnering with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise on that. Still working with Kainoa on strategic investment funds and developing an investment briefing for ministers, all ministers, of our key regional priorities. Really good news last week, we got confirmation that we'll be welcoming a Tasmanian trade delegation to Nelson Tasman in August, and just starting to work with the Tasmanian team, and we'll be reaching out to businesses shortly for interest in that. So that was great. And that was in response to discussions we've been having with them about the really strong synergies between our two economies. If you can, next slide, please. In our Regional Business Partners Programme, tremendous news. We've just received that NRDA has been successful in its bid for the continued contract to manage for Te Tauihu, the NRDA, the RBP bid for this region. This is really important to us. It's not so much about the funding, of course, so that is important, but it's about what this programme means to us. It not only do we work with the chambers in terms of capability grants, but core funding for us is the Callaghan Research and Development funding that Mark manages, and it's a strong connection to us, to our major regional firms, and we leverage that strongly across NRDA's business and connect in with those firms. Linked to that, we're also just finalising the contract for a new 12-month digital boost service, which will deliver through the RBP programme. This is really to run workshops for businesses right across industry sectors to really strengthen their digital capabilities. We'll be running a strengthened innovation series through our collab, looking forward to that. And shortly, in partnership with the Regional Skills Leadership Group, the workforce plans will be coming out with the first focus on aquaculture and construction. Our E2E broker program, it was extended to the end of June this year, which is great, with 2023, which is great. I'd really love to see that as a long-term program because that's long game. And we'll be working with the with MSD MB on developing a business case for a regional skills hub. We've got major developments, including the hospital, the science tech precinct, and many more happening over the next 5 years. And it's really critical that we have the skills, the training, and the workforce in line for that. So that would be a business case we'll be working on with the region. In our visitor economy, we're working to year 2 of the Destination Management Investment Plan. Disappointing recently has been a lack of any announced funding through the government for continued support for that into its second year. And we would love to see that from the government and feel it's very, very important at this stage of the strategy. We are working on an industry partnership model, but one of the reasons why it's disappointing not to have further support through Destination Management Plan funding from government is this is not the time to be expecting industry support, and at least another year on that would really help that situation. We're reconnecting to the international travel trade. We've had some great heavily subsidised travel from Tourism New Zealand, and Donna in our team was in Sydney recently. Tracy will be heading over to North America on that funding, and we'll be representing the whole of Te Tauihu for that, and Marble will be representing the whole of Te Tauihu in Europe on the same thing. Our business events and conferences are really picking up, and I'll just show you a bit of that in a second. And the good news is our tourism summer bookings are looking good. We will be launching a new Winter Locals Ambassadors campaign, And a new program which we're just finalising the partnership arrangements on is a tourism and conservation jobs broker. You may have heard about the Jobs for Nature program. This is a partnership with DOC and MB and MSD, and this is to look at connecting those employed in our tourism industry in with conservation jobs, particularly in our national park areas, to keep jobs continuous, but also to strengthen that link between the sectors. And if I next slide, please. And this is just a flavour of the level of events and conferences happening right across the region in all sectors. So it's really great to see these picking back up. And when these conferences happening, it may be a conference that happens in the Trafalgar Centre in Nelson, but their day visits and their tours and their partners programs are very much in the whole of the region. So this affects the whole region. And you may have started going to them. What we need now to do is really encourage people to be going out and about and starting to reconnect. So if you could just turn to the next page, please. And just to reiterate, we really welcome engagement. We really welcome any businesses that might be listening or you know of to join the Regional Insights Panel, which is our business survey, and to give us feedback on what you're hearing and to encourage local support. And there's a newsletter link there as well. So thank you very much. I think that's the final slide now.
Thanks, Fiona, for the comprehensive overview of what you are doing and what you're looking forward to doing in the future. There's time for a few questions. So are there any questions anyone has for Fiona or anyone else who's on the call from NRDA for that matter? Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. Thank you, Fiona, for your presentation. The Kanoa Strategic Investment Fund sounds interesting and exciting with the possibility of central government money. Is there anything more you can tell us in terms of what the bids are, when we might expect to hear, or what they're for?
Thank you, Councillor. So this was first announced by Minister Nash in May last year. It's fair to say it's been a long process. We very quickly responded to government's request to work as the whole of the region to Tauihu to look at what are whole of region priorities. No surprises, the priorities are heavily in the science and tech. We quickly identified sectors, being oceans and forestry and food and fibre, with a science tech emphasis on that. The projects which we put forward to them include projects such as Port Tarakoe to be reconsidered for funding. It is a long process, and there are a series of meetings. We have also reached out to about 34 companies across the region, and I understand at this stage at least there's two companies that are still looking at that. The limitation of the fund is a challenge and has been frustrating for the region in what it doesn't fund. So it is not grants, it is loans and equity, and there's a range of things it doesn't fund. So as I mentioned, what we are doing though is using the advice that Kanoa have given us to take it as more than just the fund, and that's to use them as the window and door into wider government funding opportunities, which we're very much doing. We're very much using the priorities that we've identified with Project Kokori and across the region to inform the briefing for ministers, so that we're keeping the profile of the priorities for investment out there, and at every opportunity we'll be providing that, and I will be sending that through to councillors as soon as that's ready. But they are the major projects which are identified in terms of, as I said, Port Tarakoe, science and tech investment, the science tech precinct, innovation investment into our firms, and others.
Briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, just in terms of the briefing for ministers, was that the thing that you referred to that you would send through to us, or is that a confidential document?
I will provide that to councillors.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Walker and then Councillor Hill.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just checking in on, do we have an update of what's happening with the eyesight models, and is there a time frame where the tier 1, tier 2s will be decided?
Thank you. So the national model, as I understand it, I actually sat next to Paul Yeo, who's leading the proposal for that. He was waiting to hear anything in the budget about that, and so that hasn't yet been decided. As you know, the Nelson eyesight are obviously, and the Tasman District eyesights are run differently. But the tier one, the national review of it, they're really waiting to see what the outcome of that would be. And he did say any day now he was waiting for an outcome of that. So yeah, that's all I have on that at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill and then Councillor Greening.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona, for the presentation. There's a lot covered quickly there, wasn't there?
It was, sorry.
Yeah. In terms of the Kanoa still looking at loans and equity, and we know already that the Port Tanakohi, that ain't going to work really. You know, we said no last time. So, and so you're phrasing about a window into wider government funding options. Is that are there those wider options? Are they concrete and you know, something that exists that's clear, or is that a more of a principal idea?
I'm pausing because it's a bit of a combination, I think. It exists that we're encouraged to make clear what our investment priorities are, but there's not a set grant or fund that directly matches it. So we're ensuring that we're working with the council team, obviously, in terms of the business case. We will be meeting with Kanoa to discuss that in more detail and look at what might work. So although technically it wouldn't directly fit in terms of limit, we are encouraged to have an open conversation about the investment priorities.
Thank you.
It
I think you know what I'm
sounds,
after, but it's
no,
not, I know it's not clear, but I guess it's you know, it's an important thing, you know, that we get the port up to where it needs to be, and I guess yeah, it just feels like we're in the unknown still, and there's not much there that's sort of directly obvious. Or
I think with a project like this, I mean, it's on the top of the list in terms of the priorities. In terms of keeping in front the business, the economic impact of the huge value of this to the region, that's why we're pushing. I think it's fair to say that none of the major projects in our investment list fit directly with Kanoa, but we're working with Kanoa in terms of presenting cases. The Kanoa then refer to the regional economic development ministers, and we'll be looking at every opportunity to present that. And that's why I think it's important that we have the briefing for ministers ready, that we've got the summary of the business cases and the impact of those projects in there. And we'll definitely be working. I don't think there's one particular fund it would directly fit, but we are still encouraged by them to talk to them about this project.
thank you.
They're very good at the chatty part, not so good at the delivery, but
we'll keep working on it.
Councillor Greening.
Just a couple of observations and a quick question, and it's probably more for the benefit of the public, the question I'm going to ask, but just an observation. Some of the slides that you're presenting, I know, are very high level, and you've got a lot to present, and that was quite impressive. But and I'm sure you will, in your annual plan, no doubt, show other measures for the success of some programs. So I know you, and one of them is just 1,000 engagements, but I think there needs to be a bit more around just measuring the success. Engagement, while great, there's money invested. It'd be good to see other measures that are showing the success of those programs, and I'm sure they will be presented in your annual report. So I just make that observation. I am also interested in, again, this is an observation maybe for your annual report, risks. I note that a lot of what we're doing here is dependent on government funding and government institutions, Jobs for Nature program, a COVID funded initiative. Those funds are coming to an end, and we have opposition parties signalling that they're not necessarily supportive of major funders like Callaghan, etc. And there are risks that those institutions or funds may disappear. So it'll be interesting to see how you look to mitigate those types of risks again in your annual report. The question I have for you though, so they're just observations, you don't need to answer those, but what I'm interested in is a lot of people come to me and talk about NRDA, and is it still relevant given now that the government has established regional skills leadership groups, which are also monitoring the market and looking at employment, talent and all the rest of it. And it's interesting to see some of their data that's coming through. I was looking recently at their last report where they were basically signalling Nelson Tasman, 2% population growth, 50% of that over 65. and our challenge is to attract talent. So how do you explain your difference between RSLGs for the benefit of the public, and given those population data, where do you see, how are you going to address what looks to be still, we are pretty much a low wage economy according to the RSLGs, and heavily now dependent on LD population, which is not necessarily developing a lot of spend?
Thank you. Just in two parts, that question. So the RSLGs, the scope of the RSLGs, they've been set up with specific, as we know, the specific scope to look at the skills needs. I'm on the Regional Skills Leadership Group. I'm part of that group. It's a specific need. Much of the information that the RSLG for our region has put out comes from the NRDA. It's from our economic profile. It's from our productivity review. It's from our own research. So we directly inform that information. The scope that the NRDA has is much, much, much wider and much longer term. So our scope is regional economic development in a whole. So it's the broader strategy for the region, which the RSLGs are working to for this region. It's looking at research and funding into the businesses, which RSLG is not doing. We're also the RTO for the region. We're looking at skills as part of it, but we absolutely must look at the breadth of economic development in its whole. So it's a very, very different scope. And in terms of the relevance, I mean, I'd say it's never been more relevant. You know, you can't, it's in terms of the importance that we have a long-term view of regional growth, that we're responsive. The RSLGs won't provide the COVID response. They're a different scope, but it is important. And thank you for raising that in terms of the callers who might wonder these acronyms. But the Regional Development Agency has a long-term scope and it has depth as well. But it's very important we're part of that Regional Skills Leadership Group with other organisations and connecting you with industry. In terms of the low wage economy, that's part of our broader challenge as a region. Part of the challenge we are attracting investment to people to live, work and invest in the region. It's part of our regional proposition that we must build. Part of the investing into productivity project is to try and build productivity in companies, to invest in innovation so we can increase those wages. The productivity, the housing issue, the low wages are all go hand in hand, and it's part of it's a big challenge. It's not one we're going to fix short term, and it won't be fixed by the RSLGs, but that's a really important part of the picture.
So
Can I ask a follow-up question?
well, as long as it's relatively short and it's a question.
The RSLGs, they are looking, though, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, at future of work as well. So they are looking at future direction and trying to establish a strategy that might shift our focus on industries that are traditionally low wage, agricultural, primary, into more higher value industries.
Absolutely, and we're working with them on that and identifying priority sectors to look at each year and to build that in. But as I said, we're very much working within the strategy of the region, and the RSLGs are working within the context of the strategies that we've set with our partners.
And can I just say
Thank you.
Oh.
So we've got time to keep to, so a couple of questions there. Thank you for the answers. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for coming along, Fiona, and covering a lot in a short space of time. Appreciate the presentation and your availability to answer those questions. Thanks to the other members of the NRDA who have attended. And we look forward to no doubt seeing you at your next opportunity to provide us an update. So, and best of luck with what are in many cases quite significant challenges that, as you pointed out, many of them are medium to long term before we see solutions. So thanks once again.
Thank you. Thanks.
Right, we will move on with the agenda. So next up, we have a referral report in relation to an omission in relation to historic exclusion, blah, blah, blah. Elaine.
I'm happy to move.
Do you want to add anything to your written report before I open it up for either questions, comments, or moving and seconding?
Only to say that the second recommendation just closes the loop in the way that we've dealt with the committees and subcommittees' emission of the text.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved, councillor Bryant, seconded councillor Tufnell. Are there any questions or comments in relation to the item? If not, sorry, councillor Greening.
So just for the benefit of people who are probably reading all this and going, what does this really mean? We're just tidying up what is probably loose administrative compliance for some of in committee meetings that we've held.
Yeah, so when I was reviewing some agendas and minutes, I realised that something didn't quite look right, and our Info Council system uses templates, scripts and inserts. The insert that had the text in, had the wording in, it wasn't in between bookmarks that pulled it through into our agendas and minutes. So if you weren't looking closely, everything was fine. So we noticed it and we took advice and we decided to acknowledge it and mitigate any risk. So it's purely admin. It's a low risk, but we're being transparent and it's been put right. And we've done everything that we need to do to remove any challenge or.
Thank you.
Just follow the risk. But how was it identified?
We were reviewing our agendas and minutes and just noticed something didn't look right and looked into it further.
So fortunate eyes, is that what you're saying? So maybe that's also just from a risk perspective, having maybe a review, because I'd hate to think that we put this out by accident and maybe we need to be reviewing our things. Yeah.
So I think that the reason it was picked up is because someone has been reviewing it. So
Okay. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
Good.
Clearly something that we need to continue to do on a regular basis, given how reliant we are on getting things accurate to prevent risks in the future. So, Councillor Hill.
Just to say that I appreciate the that's been picked up. So this has been going on for quite a while, and I think to think that you can get a sense of something's not quite right, although it's not really obvious. I'm appreciative of that it has been picked up and that you're in the waka with us. So that's great.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Next up, we have another referral report in relation to licence to occupy the Takaka Saturday Market. Margot, welcome.
I take the report as read and am happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Open for questions, Councillor Hill.
I don't really have a question so much that I'm happy to. Oh, I'm right. I'm happy to move the resolution. Grant Knowles runs the market really well, in my view. It's a really good event in Golden Bay. It was Saturday morning through the season. It's vibrant and it's a good opportunity for to support local producers. It's popular and well run essentially. So I'm supportive of it being granted. And
So,
happy to move.
Happy to move the resolution. So move Councillor Hill, seconded Councillor Butler. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just to say that there is a report further on in the attachments, and that things haven't been always smooth sailing, but as it's made clear in the report that the council's role is just as a licensor, so things are being resolved on a week by week basis.
Indeed.
So happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Turley.
I was just going to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Ogilvie.
Just a quick question, perhaps to Councillors Hill and Butler. How did the Easter Sunday market go? Or the day was free of the restrictions? It's probably not an appropriate question given the target, but I just want to be timely.
Oh, I'm happy to say that, that it was, Easter was an extremely profitable time for Golden Bay, and there were a huge number of people in town. So,
Councillor Hill.
I could add that I was away actually at Easter, but one of my friends came to the Bay and said they went to the shoe shop said, oh, I see you're open, given the change in the bylaw. And they said, yes, we felt like we should, given that they've gone to all that effort to make it an option for us.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no further questions, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, our next report is in relation to adopting the Moutere Waimea Reserve Management Plan, and Anna and Richard. I'm just, my bad. I jumped one. Yeah. It's all good. We'll just carry on. I'm sure. Sure. It's not going to be the end of the world. That's my bad. Yeah, Anna, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. So I'm happy to take my report as read and answer any questions, but first I'd like to hand over to the chair of the hearing panel because I think she wants to say a few words.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. You know, the Reserve Management Plan, it's such an important document, I think, for the council and the community. It's where the community goes to actually understand the history of the places that are special to them, the management activities to be undertaken, and the longer term vision for those places. I just want to say it was actually a privilege to chair this particular hearing committee, supporting really the great work done by Anna and Richard. So I really want to thank you both for what has been a tremendous effort. I also want to mention that I think the final plan is really, you know, it's been enhanced as a result of the public consultation process. So many of the issues that were raised by the public about those places that they deeply care for, we've taken that on board. And really, it was great to be able to acknowledge the huge work of volunteers actually who work in our reserves. I'd also just like to thank Councillors Ogilvie and Turley, who were also members of the panel, and thanks to Kura Stafford and Ursula Hassel, who were appointed to the panel and really provided great depth of knowledge and information. So I'm definitely would like to move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Is there a seconder for the seconded Councillor Turley? And do you wish to speak?
No, I'd just like to endorse really what Councillor Mackenzie has said. And I think it's a win-win for the community.
Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Just a quick comment. The two EU representatives, like they were with the Kingsland reports and management plan, were excellent. And I just want to underline the comment that Councillor Mackenzie has made. It was a really worthwhile involvement for us and hopefully from them.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a comment and a couple of questions, if I may. Just, yeah, I did actually zoom in for the submission hearings for a short while, and yeah, that was going really well, and just thank the panel for their work. Just have a couple of questions about some particularly relating to Wakefield. The newly acquired Martin land, there's recommendations related to that. What's its current status? Is that reserve land, or how does that work?
Yes, there is a classified reserve. So it's part of the recreation reserve conglomerate of parcels there. Yeah, they're all classified as recreation now.
Right, so the recommendations you had about the roading, they'll be progress while they are talking to Wakakotari about the entranceway.
Yeah, you always need to talk with them because it goes onto the highway.
And the other question just relates to the recommendation for Fortners Bush and the parking. Will that exclude people being able to drive on the grass and take their vehicle to a table or picnic area? Because a lot of people do that.
Sorry, I can't actually remember. what did we decide with that one? Was it,
It's a bit unclear.
is this one the half year round one? Or sorry, we've been back and forth so many times. Can you remember,
Yeah, well,
Christine?
you've
maybe?
alluded that it's year-round parking be formed, but what I wasn't sure, did that prevent access? And people use it quite widely to drive on the grass to go to have their own picnic or function or whatever. Function's probably not the right word.
I might just provide a comment there, if I may,
You may.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, that was a bit of a discussion item, and I think the details probably need to be still worked out. What we were clear is that we didn't really want to close off the option of the road, because actually in order to access some of the facilities, particularly where you might have, you know, parents or caregivers with young children that you need to get from the car park to the facilities, you know,
Like the
that could be, like the playground, that could be a barrier. So we were keen to retain that option. Whether in fact it involves driving on the grass, I think that might be another matter.
Yeah, and that's the issue, I think. Because most of the time it's fine, it's just when it's wet and muddy.
So I think in terms of clarification, I take it that there is the proposal to develop some all-weather kind of all-year parking. Whether or not that involves excluding other options is probably left open.
Correct.
So the other options are not excluded. Is that the clarity? I think that's the clarity Councillor Bryant's seeking.
Sorry, we're just looking at the amended version here. So it just says, to address this, vehicle access to the reserve will be restricted year-round to an enlarged landscape car park area near the entrance of the state highway and existing toilets. The enlarged car park will have capacity for 30 vehicles.
Okay, so that is basically saying that that's the only place you'll be able to drive and park.
Yes.
Was that the intention?
Sorry, and then the policy goes on to say retain a formed path linking the car park to the playground along the route of the internal road, prioritise implementation of this policy. So, but obviously for maintenance sakes, there'll be removable things so that maintenance vehicles can get in as well.
Was that the intention of the panel?
Well, I'd need to go back to my records, which obviously I don't have here. I think that it was the intention to enable easy access to the facilities, because actually it is quite a distance from the car park, and this was a matter I actually talked about because I've experienced it myself, trying to manoeuvre young children and buggies and all the rest of it to actually get to the playground. That sometimes if you had to just park your car in a car park and get there, it's a barrier to access. So maybe this might come under minor edits.
Well, I think it is reasonably, because the way it's currently worded, if I take what Anna just read out, it basically means there'll be a formed car park for 30 cars, and outside that, that's it. So if it's full with 30 cars, that's your lot. And equally, you can't, even in the summer when it's dry and hard, you can't trundle over to the picnic table, park up and hop out, or trundle over to the playground, park up and hop out. So that appears to be the wording. If that's not what our intention is, then we need to be quite clear, unless that wording has more wiggle room in it than I've taken from it.
Yeah.
Because it makes perfect sense at certain times of the year to ensure that cars don't drive on the grass, and probably for periods it might be that like at night as well, or access. I don't know how that's managed currently. It's really the panel need to be clear that they're happy with what's the outcome of what's being suggested. I thought this was straightforward. Councillor Wright, you should have had this conversation with them earlier.
Well, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I just wanted to clarify. And I only saw it.
Well, I don't know
when I
how
was
to,
reading.
I mean, it's not for me to respond, is it?
No. So I guess the question is so the way that is worded, does that effectively mean that from this point there will be no further access outside the formed car park area? And if it is, then we just have to be clear that A, that was the panel's intention, and B, that we're happy with that outcome.
And they tell the Wakefield community.
I think we need to just check that and come back on that particular matter, because I think my recollection differs slightly to what's in the report. Yeah. But I think we need to check that in the notes from the deliberations meeting.
So in terms of how we address this, in terms of the recommendation that we have in front of us, which is to effectively adopt the plan, including that wording, unless we need to add something to saying subject to
Well, it does say
subject. Yeah, I know, but minor edits
or changes.
Yeah, so we need to be clear what the minor edit might be, because if it change, so if yes, I think we just need to have a specific addition that says clarifying the issue in relation to the car parking at Faulkner's Bush, blah, blah, blah.
So we could add including clarification of the issue relating to car parking at Faulkner's Bush, or something like that.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear.
Has someone moved it?
I think it was moved by Councillor Mackenzie and seconded by Councillor
That's
Zerley.
what I was doing.
Yeah. So if they're both happy with the additional wording, I won't go through the amendment process. Okay, thank you. Councillor Greening.
This is more process
Did you have
issue,
anything?
but in the attached documents of the entire plan, it doesn't appear to be the entire plan. It stops at about 162. So are we adopting just to 162, or are we adopting to
My version has 168 pages, I think. So I haven't seen the diligent version, sorry.
in the diligent version, it stops at 162.
So is it the references page? That's at
So
the
in
end.
the, I'll just see if I can find the, where are we? Because I marked it. About page 370 of our agenda, it ends and it starts to go into asbestos pictures, which I assume is another report.
Sorry, I can't.
So I haven't had the opportunity to read anything beyond 162. So
Oh, weird. Yeah, I'm just looking at Richard's version here, and that does look wrong. I'm not sure what happens when diligence not showing it.
well, I haven't had the opportunity to read the rest of it. That's all.
Yeah. So I mean, we are largely receiving the recommendations of the hearing panel. So look, I'm reasonably confident if they are happy with what's included.
So are there any changes?
So what happens, just for clarification, the section beyond page 162 contains
changes.
what?
Sorry, there's a few more individual reserves on there because I think it was in Wakefield, was it? So policies on them, and then there's all the appendices and references as well. I could email it to you.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate track change version actually, because that would highlight very quickly what I need to look at.
Do you want to adjourn this part while I email it to you?
No.
No, I can. Yeah.
So do we have to update or mention the fact that we're passing a report that isn't complete because it's referred to an incomplete report in the agenda?
Right.
I would just say, I mean, the hearing panel, we have had the tracked changed version of the full plan as part of our deliberations.
Appreciate that.
Just make that point, Mr. Chair.
Yep, fully appreciate that, but we are referring to a document.
So I think we do have to A, note it, and B, that the minutes or agenda, like so any members of the public who ultimately, so this needs to ensure that it is ultimately updated to include all of the total report or management plan. So
yeah. So out of interest, were there any changes to Lee Valley Reserve?
No, I'm pretty sure we didn't change leave value reserve at all. I can just double check.
So there certainly seems to be only about half the management plan on the agenda. Only the full plan should go at least to page 238. So,
So,
Right.
what I was just a bit confused as to whether we're just looking at a particular section of the management plan.
No, we're not.
If it's
We're
the whole
looking at
thing,
all of it.
and I got the impression just from this discussion, it looked like it's going to be the whole thing. So that's why I was raising the
It
point
is.
that it's not all there.
So, right.
Is there any rush to push this through? Can we just kick it off to the next and have the full report?
Okay, so look, given that kind of shambolic mess we find ourselves in, I think it's probably, and I don't think there is an urgency to pass it today. So I think we'll just let the item lie on the table and circulate the entire document and come back. Oh, it should be a pretty straightforward process at the time that we have all the information. So we'll just have to, yeah. So I'm not going to go backwards and forwards through it. Obviously, some people have seen some of it. Given the discussion we had earlier about ensuring that all our documentation and our resolutions and everything are covered. So we just had that conversation about why it's important to be technically correct in the environment that we operate in. So in order to ensure that we are, I don't see any issue with just letting the item lie on the table and return to it at another date. It should be pretty straightforward. If it needs to come to a full council meeting because of delegations.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Yeah.
So either if we have a full council meeting or we may be able to schedule one in conjunction with strategy and policy or regulatory for just a short item to consider that one agenda item.
Yeah, strategy and policies next week. That would work well.
All right.
Apologies about
Okay, thank you. Apologies for the technological challenges, but this is one of the challenges with the systems that we operate and the vast volume of some of the documentation. It is quite clunky and there's a lot of work has to go in to put these agendas together. Hopefully at some point we get a system that works a lot more seamlessly than it does currently. Right. Hopefully onto an item that doesn't face any significant technological challenges, but I look at faces in the back. my confidence is not entirely there. Kim and Dwayne, in terms of the referral report wastewater bylaw adoption, over to Kim.
Thank you, and kia ora koutou, councillors, morena. So just to summarise, the wastewater bylaw has been through a thorough process of review and public consultation. The hearing and deliberations panel heard one submitter, so there were two submissions after the consultation period. That submitter, their suggestion has been included in the amended wastewater bylaw. And it is the recommendation of the hearings submission panel for full council to adopt the bylaw. We just need to note we've had some further legal advice just on the title of the bylaw, so that that reflects the wording and what we consulted on in the public consultation process. More clearly. So we have got a further resolution there, new number 3, that the name of the bylaw is changed on the title page and in the document itself to Wastewater Bylaw 2022. And so the next resolution, which would be resolution 4, alters the wastewater bylaw 2022 and strikes out 2015 amended 2022. And the final resolution there that council agrees that the wastewater bylaw 2015 will be revoked on the new bylaw coming into force.
Okay, thank you. Everyone clear on those changes? Yeah, I've got Councillor Dowler has indicated he was happy to move as well. So you've both. Given the subject matter, that's probably entirely appropriate. Move councillor Dowler, seconded councillor Tufnell. Are there any further questions or comments in relation to it, councillor Greening?
It's a comment really, which is great to see alignment with Nelson bylaw and good to see that the submissions that were submitted actually did pick up the definition issue, which was addressed. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Greening. Is there any further comments or questions? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? Carried. Well, at this point, we'll break briefly for a cup of tea, come back at 5:02-ish. And the next item on the agenda is the Golden Bay Grandstand. When you feel like it. We'll reconvene the meeting. We'll get back underway. So the next item we have is the report on the Golden Bay Grandstand budget, and this is under Richard and Joe's names. So I will hand over which of you is leading the conversation. Richard Hollier, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to have the report taken as read, and we'll answer any questions councillors may have.
Okay, thank you. Open for questions, councillor Butler, and then councillor Hill.
Thank you. I'm happy to move this, but I'd just like to ask a question about the funding, and I see that it's recommended that the Golden Bay Grandstand extras come out of the district facilities rate. There has been a feeling that the Golden Bay community have maybe not contributed enough to this project, and I'm just wondering about whether or not it could be that it come out of the Golden Bay Reserves Fund. So just be interested to know on what your thinking is about that. And the point being that having it sort of more visibly paid for by the Golden Bay community.
Richard.
Okay, thank you, councillor. I think the community board, the reserves facility, a reserves financial contributions fund is about 484,000, I think, at the moment. We've recommended 300,000 of that be used for the car park, which would leave 184. So if you wanted to fund the 195 from that, you'd have nothing left in your reserve facilities account. So, I mean, it's your choice, but effectively be minus 10,000 in the account. Correct.
Question. I'm reading the resolution. The Golden Bay Board Reserves Financial Contributions Fund that has a balance of 8. Oh no, yeah, that's an 8, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an
829.
And that's not correct either, apparently.
That's not correct, I'm afraid. Where are you reading that?
Well, just the resolution.
Can I clarify? The $400,000 figure that's referred to in there is what's been generated by way of income in the current financial year. The current balance in the RFC's account and as at the 30th of April is 767,000. So there was an opening balance of 344,606 as of the 1st July, and year-to-date contribution of 483,823, and that's then offset by capital expenditure in the year to date. So there is a significant sum in that account, but we had identified and budgeted $101,000 of capital works in the report to the community board for the 22-23 financial year, and there's also around a further 150,000 of uncompleted works in this current financial year, which would leave a balance of about 5,000 if the additional grandstand works and car parks were funded from reserve financial contributions. which would be pretty heavy commitment on that account.
Okay, so thank you for those updated figures because they don't. So I'm just reading from the resolution, where it says the reserve financial contribution has a balance of 829,000 as at 1 May 2022. So the resolution needs to reflect the situation that exists. So if the latest figures are what you just outlined, Richard, then, and if that's the justification or / the rationale for the recommendation, which taken on Councillor Butler's question, which is why could it not be? And I think what you've outlined is a combination of the opening balance, the recommendation to spend the car parking money, the existing commitments for the following year, and the commitments in this year that have not yet been completed would completely use up the balance. Okay, so is everyone clear where we are? Councillor Bryant appears not to be. So just
yeah, I think I am.
Okay. Yeah, I'll come to you, Councillor Greening, just hi-ho. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Hill.
Yeah, so the car park, finishing off of the car park, maybe that could come out of the reserves facility fund instead, so that we effectively do a swap. District facilities fund, sorry.
Or that would.
I know that it's seems to be sort of messing around with numbers, but it just goes back to this principle of the Golden Bay community actually contributing to the grandstand costs.
So I think at the moment, what we've got is a resolution that is asking us to state our preference.
So
which
we need
the draft resolution.
Yeah.
So at the moment, the options are you fund the 185 from one of the suggested sources and the car parking from one of the suggested sources. So if you're moving a resolution and if you want the greatest contribution from Golden Bay in inverted commas, then you would fund the car parking because that's the higher amount from the RFCs and the overrun in terms of the facility completion from the district facilities rate. Well, it's, just to be clear, what Councillor Butler's question was should we fund all of it from the RFCs? And the answer is, well, you could just, however, it would effectively eliminate the total amount. So that's obviously something we could choose to do, but we just need to be clear what it means. So at the moment, we don't have a mover. We've just had a question. So I will come to Councillor Hill while we think about it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard, for emails yesterday clarifying some of these amounts and getting the current balance right there for us. I think it's optics as a part of what we're talking about. And for me, I'd like to see if there's room, and it leaves a very small balance, if there's room to fund the grandstand extras and the car parking completion out of RFCs, then I'd support that. We'd keep money in there unspent because, you know, this is a you know, we've got an incredible looking grandstand at the moment. It's not even finished. It's full of new wood, you know, and I think that I think if Golden Bay has got money in its reserve, then it needs to come out of there for the grandstand. And I don't mind so much as there's a small balance left, because what's it for? It's to spend money on reserve. Pardon? Yeah, reserve developments. And that's what these things are. I mean, getting this completed is really important. The rec centre has been waiting for years to get its completed code of compliance. So the car parking is essential to that, which can't be completed until the grandstand is done. I note that the $300,000 for the car parking might not be the actual figure. So I think there was a meeting yesterday about that. and I think it won't be known for maybe another month what the actual figure is. Got an initial question around what are the options in terms of the level of finish of the car park? Are there options there, or does it need to be sealed?
Yeah, we'll be presenting some options on what to do with the car parking. At the moment, we're focusing on the drainage aspects of it, because those are the more complex matters. But down the track, we'll be thinking of the finish levels, whether it's clearly asphalted or a loose chip, or so yeah, we will be in that 30th of June meeting.
So the 300,000 isn't known as being it's anticipated it could be that amount, but we don't know that.
Correct.
And so we could go grandstand RFCs, indicate the car parking out of there, and you know, if there's not enough in there to cover the car parking when the numbers know, and then look at something else. I'd just like to say too that I'd just like to note Noel Bagent's points about 3 reports being produced around the state of the grandstand and what would be required to reinstate it. I don't know, how did we end up here that there's been bora not identified in there, and rotten wood and rotten piles? So I know it's all been done, isn't it? But what will give us confidence about when we look at reports in the future talking about the standard of some older building?
Who's answering that question? Richard Hollier, and then I've got a comment from Richard Kirby.
I think the difficulty is when you've got a building like that, it's how invasive you go at the beginning in terms of uncovering things, and a lot of the quality of the timber and the condition of the timber only became evident once walls have been fully taken the linings off and ceilings have been removed and things like that, and same with the foundations until the floor was taken up and you could see right underneath, and they started doing some of that work, then it became evident. And also after the squash courts removed from the side, there was some slight movement in the building as well, wasn't it? And Joe might want to comment further on that, but it certainly wasn't evident.
No,
at the beginning.
I get it. It's just there's a significant amount of extra wood has gone in there, hasn't there, compared to what was anticipated. I have had a question I have raised with staff around the extra asbestos costs. So there was a contract with somebody to go in and make an assessment around asbestos and get rid of it, and a bunch of it hasn't been gotten rid of. Is there any callback on that work, on that contract?
We've been looking at whether that's possible. It really depends on the brief that they were given and what they were originally engaged to do. And and I think they were a subcontractor to another contractor. So it's sort of difficult to sort of pin that down at the moment.
Yeah, and just finally, in terms of the community contribution, I'm disappointed that we haven't had the resource to follow through with what we said we'd do. So I made offers very early on to fill out funding applications to Rata and Lotteries Heritage and whoever else, and AMP agreed we could do something through them to better enable those applications to be made. Staff took it on to say that they would assist AMP, which was fantastic to do that. All the information's there, isn't it? And it was quite a bit of a shock to me to hear that actually I was thinking, oh, I wonder how that's all going, and then to hear that actually the applications haven't been made. So that was the way that the community was going to try and contribute. Just making that point really, I suppose. I mean, I could move something, but I'm just not sure where you're sitting still, Councillor Butler, about moving.
So I just wanted to get clarity around the numbers because you ran through them pretty quickly. So can you just give me a sense of what will be the balance in the and the RFC at the end of this financial year, which is less than a month away? And what will be the balance, projected forecasted balance at the end of the next financial year, which starts nearly a month away?
So just trying to work that out because it's not exactly the way that the numbers presented here. So so the current balance in the RFC was as at the end of April was 767,410.
So what will it be at the end of this financial year, which is a month?
So we'll work through that.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that's that figure minus what is intended to be spent in this year, which was $100 and something thousand.
So so that has been offset by
Would it be useful to come back to this when we've got a bit more financial numbers? Because I think we need some time.
I don't want to keep putting things off. We've done one. This one should be resolvable because it's just maths, and someone can do the maths pretty quickly, I would have thought. So we know what the current balance is. We know what the intended expenditure for the balance of this financial year is. We know what's intended to be spent in the following financial year because it's contained in the annual plan. And we know what the indicative cost of these two projects are. So the maths shouldn't be that difficult to do to understand how we arrive at a figure, which I think Richard indicated earlier was a balance of $5,000.
That's the balance at the end of 22. Sorry, just make sure I get this right. So 2022. Yeah, so with I guess what we've looked at is that the balance of work of the fund as at the end of 22-23 financial year would be 5,000, assuming that we had what we've budgeted so far, which is 101,000 of capital works for the 22-23 financial year, and in that assumption includes the 300,000 for the car parking and the 195 for the additional grandstand works. So because I think, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because I was just saying if you had room in the next financial year where there's a carryover, but you've actually factored that into your thing. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so really, we don't have much in our RFC to play with for basically next financial year, which is when all the bills will come in. Yeah.
And I think that's right, because there's very little development in Golden Bay. I think that extra inflow of funds has really been related to a particular subdivision this year.
That's the clarity I wanted. It would be useful maybe next time we do this kind of thing to present that in a bit more of a formulaic table, because the numbers just don't add up in this report.
Correct.
Okay, then thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. So I just want to restate my understanding of the numbers, which is that if we funded the balance needed for the grandstand 195, and if we funded 300,000 for the car park, but we don't think we would need that much, all that's possible out of the RFCs, and we would have a balance of $5,000 left. So my view is that actually we should fund it from the RFCs. Actually, at some level, what I'm hearing from our communities is that they expect the RFCs to be spent. And they don't expect the council just to be sitting there with effectively money in the bank. So that would be my preferred approach. In fact, I think that was what I heard Councillor Hill state as well. I haven't gone back to the minutes of our meeting when we approved the funding for the grandstand, but my recollection is that we were very much assured that there would be fundraising, and that what we were approving at the time was the absolute worst case scenario. And so I am quite shocked to think that we haven't progressed the fundraising, because actually that's really just saying that we've given up on accessing, that money. So I am really unhappy with that aspect of the grandstand, because that was very much part of the context that I took into my decision making. So in summary, I think that we've made a decision. We need to keep moving forward with the grandstand. Be good to get to the end of the project, and we can fund the grandstand and the car park from the RFCs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My feeling is that the growth, I'll rephrase it, the current growth in Golden Bay is reasonably limited, and therefore the growth in the RFCs is also limited. My feeling quite strongly is to actually move 195,000 from the district facilities rate and the 300,000 from the RFCs. Now note also item 4 or clause 4 of the draft resolution. What we recommend goes back to the community board and to the, I've lost it, to the recreation committee for their comment, and then it'll come back again to council, I believe.
That is what the resolution says.
Exactly.
Ogilvie, 30th of June.
So I'm prepared to move 195,000 from the District Facilities Fund and the 300,000 from the RFCs. Otherwise, we'll be talking around this for the next hour or two.
To be honest, I actually support it. So just before you jump in, so are you moving that, Councillor Ogilvie? So it is moved. So as written, but including the two options, because it's currently written with options, that the overruns are funded from the district facilities rate, i.e. that's item 2, and item 3 is funded from RFCs. Move, Councillor Ogilvie. Is there a seconder for said motion?
Question of clarification.
You may have a question of clarification.
So I just want to get a sense of the timing for the 195 in terms of this is loan funded and you'll have to set an increase in the district-wide rate. Because I think what I'm sensing in the room is there is a preference to draw down the RFC first. And if the car park comes in low, we won't need to touch the 195 borrowing. But we do want that 195 available if the car park does turn out to be 300k. So I'm just wondering whether the wording would indicate and whether it's actually feasible from a technical perspective, because you have to set these rates at some point, whether you can indicate a preference to draw down for both activities and then top up with the 195. Clearly there'll be a timing issue on when you do have to draw down on the 195.
So do you got the question? Right. Right. So effectively, what Councillor Greening is suggesting, which is we could indicate that we are prepared to use $300,000 from the RFCs, and that could be spent in the first instance on the overruns, which saves us borrowing in a short term, blah, blah, blah. If then the car park comes in at a later date, we could fund that, should that be the council's view, from borrowing against the district facilities rate. So that's, I guess, the question. So rather than being specific about the two types, just say X amount of money from RFCs, Y amount of money from, and be a little agnostic as to how it's on what it is spent. Now, I suspect Mr. Drummond is now going to tell us that's not clear enough or not enough clarity, but nevertheless, Mr. Drummond.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think it's quite clear. I suppose the matter of bringing to councillors' attention, we get to set the district facilities rate once a year when we strike the rates through the annual plan or the LTP process.
Right.
So you're unlikely to have the information you need to make that decision prior to striking the rates for the 2022-23 year. So your next opportunity to increase the district facilities rate to take account of this funding proposal would be in the 23-24 year. I don't see that as being a major impediment because it applies whichever funding option you take.
I think that made it clearer. So that I think what you said, Mike, is that it is possible to do it the way that Councillor Greening is suggesting. Should we choose to, it will just require some.
That is correct.
Juggling. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question of clarification. I've got Councillor Walker. No, not yet, but I'm just open for questions currently.
Yeah, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering, can we have an explanation as to, I know I heard where Councillor Hill came from, and I also am concerned, as is Councillor Mackenzie, that my understanding was Golden Bay were going to do some fundraising themselves. Why did we not, as staff, put through those grants? Like, if Councillor Hill offered to do them, why is it that that opportunity or the door got closed on that?
Who's answering that question?
So the applications can only be made by a community group for those funding sources. So so we needed to do it as a collaborative thing, really. And so we got some support to see what funds we'd be eligible for and to scope it. And but then with the unavailability to the person to make those applications, it delayed things. And so then the project progress overtook that in terms of the eligibility for some of those funds in any event. So that was the issue. So it was a combination of timing, resourcing, and so on.
Thank you, Richard. Richard Kirby.
Can I apologise to council? Yes, I think we gave an indication that council staff would help, and we never carried that out. But at the end of the day, council staff cannot make applications to these organisations. Organisations have to, albeit that we did offer to help the community in preparing those applications, and we dropped the ball. So apologies for that. The second thing I wanted to raise earlier about the car park, the resolution or the consent for the recreation centre required a sealed car park. So that's what we are planning to do. So it's not going to be a metal car park. It will be a sealed car park. I understand we 80 car parks from memory. So I have got a figure in here, we've got a figure in here of circa 300,000 because we're doing some detailed design now. Now, I have a concern that the 300,000 may not be enough, but I've asked Joe to work with the team to make sure that we can get it within that. Because we had to make a decision on it. We haven't done detailed design. We've committed some funds to do the detailed design. And so we need to confirm the 300,000. That's why in there we've got the circa 300,000 in the resolution. And then in number 4, we do obtain feedback and we confirm the funding at the full council meeting on the 30th of June.
So I would have thought it would have been prudent to put the figure at that you were not going to exceed, so that we can have this conversation under the understanding that, because I think Councillor Hill took it that this was a figure that may come in under, and if you're now indicating that actually it's a figure that may come in over, then that's not helpful. So
we will, Mr. Chairman, we will do our best to keep within the 300,000. We were using a figure that was done for the with the car park with the grandstand removed. It was a figure that was estimated 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer, when the recreation centre was done.
So just clarify this for me.
Yeah.
What you're telling me is the figure that we got in this report is a figure that was generated 5 years ago, not a figure that was generated in the last 6 months. It's not like no one's constructing car parks or sealing things. We do the odd bit of it here and there from time to time as an entity. So we should have a pretty good grasp on what it costs. Now, I understand there's some drainage related issues that Joe mentioned earlier, which provide some complexity. But I would have thought the figure we've got is not driven from a budget that was generated 5 years ago. It's generated from what our best assessment is of what it will cost to construct the drainage and the car parking to a range of different finishes that may be impacted by the consent requirements. And that's the figure we have in front of us.
No, the figure we had 5 years ago was more like 230, 240,000. And that was on the basis of the design without the grandstand there. Now the grandstand is there, the drainage has to be altered differently, and the car parking has to be reoriented. So what impact that has on the cost, we're not sure, but we've used an escalation to get up to the 300,000 because we believe we, at this stage, based on those figures from 5 years ago, that should be a reasonable figure to aim for.
Right, thank you. Councillor Tufnell. So I've got a mover, which I'll come back to. So I have a moved resolution. So if there's any further questions before someone, because it obviously needs a seconder for it to progress. Councillor Tufnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I go back to where Councillor Hill first came in, and I think it was a fair question that she asked insofar as the additional cost. I feel once again that perhaps we've been a little bit let down there, but okay, we probably won't dwell on. But my concern right now is that when we walk away from this project, it will be done and done completely. I mean, we have the issue now with the roof, and I mean, obviously that became patently obvious that it should be done. And if there's anything else, please goodness me, could we actually finish the job this time? Thank you.
Right, thank you. So I have Councillor Ogilvy's motion. It has not yet received a seconder and doesn't look like it's going to. So coming back to the consideration, a variation on a theme, which effectively reflects Councillor Ogilvy's suggestion, but is less specific on what the money is utilised for. Is someone prepared to move that we fund effectively $300,000 towards the project from reserve financial contributions from Golden Bay and the balance from the community facilities rate? That's one option. Or is prepared to move that the entire amount is funded from the RFCs, which is obviously another option. Councillor Hill and then Councillor Mayling.
I'm happy to move the second option that you described, notwithstanding that we don't really know the cost of the car park yet, but I guess that's what we'll have to deal with when we know the actual cost after the detailed design.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. So that is that the total amount across both of these will be funded from the RFCs. Subject obviously to item 4, which is getting feedback and then reporting back to the full council meeting on the 30th of June. Can we have the wording up that reflects that? Because it's not exactly what this is going to. Well, I guess you could actually simply include under 3 reserve financial contributions and include under 2 from the same wording to avoid rewriting it. Yeah, I'll come to you, Councillor Mayling. In effect, what has been moved is that the total amount for both projects is funded from the Golden Bay Reserve financial contributions. So move Councillor Hill. I'll come back to you, Councillor Ogilvie. Move Councillor Hill. Seconded Councillor Butler. Are there any? No. Councillor Ogilvie.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Item 4 or clause 4 of the resolution means it goes to the board and to the committee and then comes back to council at the end of June. So if there is opposition to this from either of those two committees, then we'll have a final decision to make.
Correct.
All right. I just want to highlight again the limited growth and the limited amount of money coming into the RFCs into Golden Bay. It's very similar to Murchison, probably even more Motueka. The two great growth areas are Richmond, Waimea, Moutere. So long term, for me, this is a major worry for Golden Bay, Murchison, Motueka in the future. Hence, that's why I suggested 195,000 come loan funded from the community facilities rate. I'll follow that later on, probably late in June, but that's a question I think we should put in our own minds as to the long-term effects on taking this amount of money from the RFCs. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. So I'll give you a right of reply as mover if you wish to, but is this a separate? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the co-housing project subdivision, what are we likely to receive in terms of RFCs from there? Will we?
I presume so.
Going to Councillor Ogilvie's point.
There is a requirement to pay reserve financial contributions. I am aware, though, that they are prepared to offer quite a bit of land over and above what they would otherwise provide. So the question will be whether that's there's an expectation of recompense. I don't think there should be. From the council's point of view, we only would expect to get what we would require, but they're actually going to go above and beyond that. So there will be a conversation around what the reserves component will be for that development. But the normal approach is that they would be required to pay based on the average value of the sections created.
Okay, so clarify that. Thank you. Is there any further questions? Councillor Turley.
I'm just wondering if there's any indication of the increased demand for housing, or the volume of housing that would be required for the mussel industry.
So I think the SDS, the Future Development Strategy, does contain opportunities for growth in Golden Bay, both in residential and other development in various locations. And I think there is also an indication of there's some other subdivision discussion at the moment. So I think even the current plan change, does that have some related issues in Golden Bay? Dennis, do you know off the top of your head? Councillor Mailing?
Well, we did a plan change earlier this year in relation to, and it was 70 sections, which are actually on the market now. I'm thinking up Richmond Road, and Councillor Butler was on it with me. So there is more to come.
Okay, thank you. So I guess extent to which it's a question as to which of that is already included in the income that's been received. Okay, so I think the answer from all of those is that there is some potential for future revenue into the Golden Bay RFCs over the next few years. So it isn't like there is not going to be any revenue coming in. So if that helps, Councillor Ogilvie. Right, well, I think we've had a fairly good discussion on this. We've got a motion. Is there anything further very quickly, Councillor Greening and Councillor Dowler?
I just think that as the wording currently stands, where you're indicating you've got 767,000, which is not the story we've kind of been told, which is you don't have any money if the 300,000 is included, does look really peculiar.
No, I think that's pretty clear. That is the balance as at 1 May.
As at 1 May.
Yep.
But that indicates, so you've got, if we take the 300 out, you've got 467,000, which is, I've just heard that at the end of the 2023 financial year, it'll be virtually 5K that will be the balance?
So the 5K and whether or not we need to include in the, and I think your suggestion earlier that it would have been handy to have that calculation laid out in the report, and whether we need to include it as part of the discussion and minutes for clarification for anyone that reads this in the future, it would probably be useful to include that information in terms of the information we received to arrive at the decision and reflect exactly what Richard Hollier said, which is by the time you take the 760 minus the 300 and the 185, which is what's now being suggested, minus the budgeted money for the next financial year, which was 110, and minus the balance of the work that needs to be completed in this financial year, add all that together, minus it from 760, you end up at 5. So if we reflect that calculation, I realise that in the minutes, in terms of the discussion that we've had and the information we received, I think that will clarify that for people. So, yeah. Righto. Look, I think we've had, sorry, Councillor Dowler, did you want to have a, all good? Councillor Hill, do you wish to have a right of reply?
I do. I thank you, Councillor Ogilvie, for your bringing up the matter of, depleting the funds. And I think it's good to be mindful of the developments that are ongoing and potentially there for Golden Bay. Just want to make the point about the rec centre has been waiting a long time to get a completed code of compliance there, and it's really essential it gets it as soon as it's possible to get it done. So keenly aware of that as a matter, and also aware of the other wards that are have real need in terms of facility development. And so given the Wakefield community facility and the Motueka pool that they've been waiting for a long time, I feel like the decision we're making today, should it be passed, is the appropriate and respectful one.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda relates to the council extraordinary vacancy. And just by way of clarification, before I open it up for discussion and questions in terms of filling in the X's under item 6, having had conversations with various persons, the recommendation is that Councillor Hill fulfil the role as chairperson of the regulatory committee. Councillor Mackenzie becomes the replacement member on the Chief Executive Review Committee. Councillor Hill chairs the Community Awards Subcommittee. Councillor Tufnell, as a representative of Richmond, becomes a member of the Community Awards Subcommittee. And that Councillor Mailing, again replacing Richmond Councillor, Councillor Wensley, becomes a member of the Community Grants Subcommittee. Now, I understand that a lot of these are not going to have a great deal of activity in the balance of the triennium. However, it's still important to replace those roles. So on that basis, I'm happy to move the resolution contained in the agenda. Councillor Ogilvie.
I'm happy to second the resolution, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. It is open for questions or comments. If there are none, I will put the resolution unless there's anything that you would like to add from a staff perspective. Apologies.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to say that as the report states, public notification is required, and we've got the communications team on standby to let them know your decision so that we can get it into Newsline.
Thank you. Most important. We'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Machinery resolutions contained. Next item. Someone move. Moved. Councillor Mailing. Seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. CEO's report. Page 40 under diligent. And I've just got a note that you may also cover in relation to the item that has the recommendation for the TRTC. that if we, obviously someone is prepared to move and second and we pass, if we want to have a debate about the relative merits of the candidates proposed, then we would need to go into committee to ensure the privacy of those individuals is maintained. So we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah.
Over to you, Leonie.
Okay, well, I take the report as read. What I do want to recognise is Dennis Bush-King, who is retiring on the 3rd of June from council. He's been with council 33 years and counting, and he's made a significant contribution, not just to Tasman region, but nationally with his work on the RMA, the original RMA, and then implementing that as well. He's recognised as a technical expert in the field throughout New Zealand, and I think you deserve now probably a really good rest after all the work that you've done for Tasman, as well as I say, the rest of the country. So we wish you well in your retirement, and I'm sure you'll hopefully pop back. We'll probably no doubt be on speed dial because there's so much information that Dennis has. I remember when we went to Golden Bay for a committee meeting and community board meeting, sorry, and he took me for a tiki tour, and this is where this used to be and that used to be this, and so he's got so much knowledge of the area as he's seen it grow and thrive. So I just want to acknowledge you, Dennis, and thank you for your service. And we will be doing some retirement functions, which you'll be all part of, and so you can recognise them then. All right, I'll take my report as read. As I say, item 7, I've got Dwayne here to discuss that one, but are there any questions?
Any question about anything contained? I got Councillor Butler and then Councillor Greening.
Thank you for your report. And I just in relation to 3.1 and the amount of work that staff are doing, I just note that there isn't a mention in there of the Tasman Environment Plan policy planning work, which is really a huge body of work that's going on. So
Yes.
to have that recognised as well.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for recognising the staff.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Greening.
So first of all, congratulations on making a safe exit, Dennis, alive. It's a high pressure job, I'm sure. And I certainly look forward to the opportunities that you will now have, which is coming from the other side of the table and submitting and maybe taking out a few other opportunities to government as well, I imagine. I'm sure you won't go down quietly. I did have an observation just on the recycling, which was I had a read through that. I was trying to get a sense of the e-waste battery and how that is treated. I know that in Europe, which I was quite surprised about and actually thought it was a really great idea, supermarkets had taken up battery recycling, which I thought was a fantastic way to actually push battery recycling at the supermarkets and get it back to the providers. It's all about making sure the providers are allocated the true costs of the products that they are providing to the community, I suppose. So I thought that was a good idea, and I hope that will somehow trickle up as an idea.
Yep. Thank you very much.
I have some comments about recommendations, but I assume we're going into some form of committee afterwards for those discussions. But take direction from the chair on that.
Yeah, so if you wish to have a conversation about the relative merits, we will go into committee to discuss the item. So what I'll look to do is take the resolution in 2 parts. So the items that, so items 1 to 6, excluding 5, and then we can take item 5 separately. Are there any other questions in relation to the balance of the Chief Executive's report? Just following up on the point that Councillor Greening made around batteries and stewardship and the responsibility of manufacturers for the products that they produce. I think that reflects in one of the quite passionate submissions we had yesterday in relation to annual plan about the cost of the other end of the spectrum, i.e. our waste disposal and the combination of the government's levies, our own costs and the impact that has when you are trying to dispose of all of these products at the end of their life, as opposed to that stewardship role for the manufacturers and retailers to take a greater role in managing that. So I think that is something that I'm sure we have emphasised and will continue to emphasise in our submissions to government around the whole management of waste, including e-waste. So it was an important point to pick up on. Anything further before we move? So someone prepared to move items 1 to 6?
I'm happy.
Okay, move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
So that leaves us item 5. And so on the basis that Councillor Greening at the very least would wish to have a discussion about the various candidates, I will look to move into committee. So can I have a mover to move into committee? And the basis on which we would be moving into committee would be for the protection of private persons. Move Councillor Greening, seconded Councillor Bryant. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So we are now.
Isn't it right?
Yeah.
Righto, we're nearly there. So focus. We'll reconvene the public part of the meeting. The resolution in relation to the item discussed in committee, which is also come into the public part of was that the appointment be
made public.
Yeah, and the name is
Jakob Upson.
Okay, was the
So the one of you, please.
Oh, sorry, Jakob Upson was the preferred person to take up the role on the Regional Land Transport Committee. Right, the last item I think is
question on the CEO's report, just in relation
to if you just you can. We'll just wait for Leonie to come back. Sorry, Councillor Green has got a question before I move to my report. He's got a question in relation to yours. That's right. Councillor Green.
So my question is related to para 11.2 people management and the current rolling period, which is looking at a turnover of about 15.2%, which is getting pretty high.
Yes, it is. But yes, that is reflected across the whole country. Turnover in other councils has actually been a lot higher. In fact, we're actually one of the lower ones in the range. So, but yes, it is a concern. And I imagine for the next quarter, it might be even higher. And it's, so but having said that, we have managed to recruit some real stars. So we've been very fortunate, and the reputation of this council has been it's been a factor in that.
So I suppose my leading question from that is, what is the strategy in terms of mitigating those risks?
So tomorrow, Friday is tomorrow, the leadership team are having a half day discussing retention and recruitment and what our plan's going to be, looking at just the whole package that we provide to people, how we look after their wellbeing and career development. So there's quite a few factors. So we're trying to be a little bit blue sky thinking. We have to change our approach if we want to compete with other councils and central government.
Yeah, the impression I'm getting from central government is they're certainly picking up in their graduate recruitment a lot more than they ever used to. And
we are looking at graduate programs as well. It's attracting them from the local institute, which we have been trying to do in the past. That the issue we've got there is that quite a lot of these young people want to go off to Wellington, and they can offer better conditions and salaries. So
we're working remotely these days.
And working remotely, and yes, so that is a concern. But believe me, it's very much top of mind.
Okay, thank you. And I wouldn't underestimate the importance of the reputation of council as a whole. And I think that's what's so crucially important. And we've faced some phenomenally difficult challenges in this 3-year period. But I think the tone and the approach we take to debating them and discussing them, and the way that we present the council as a whole in our decision making. I don't think you underestimate how important that is when people are looking, particularly in those senior roles, to come into an organisation. They want to see that, yep, there's vigorous debate. Yes, there's good discussion. It's absolutely appropriate to debate and discuss issues and have different opinions. But if you do it in the right way and you set a constructive tone about how we address challenging issues, then I think we shouldn't underestimate how important that is in the overall attractiveness. We've got a great region to live in. That's got its challenges around house prices and things. We've got a great organisation that's got a really diverse range of opportunities for people. And if we can continue to set that tone around this table, that we can have vigorous, constructive discussion about these key issues and I think we've done a reasonably good job of that over this 2-year period. So I think it's important to maintain. Councillor Hill, we're still on the CEO's report, by the way, so we've kind of stepped back a smidge.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Yesterday, the annual plan submission hearing, someone suggested that one of the solutions to our situation would be a recruitment freeze, along with us all taking pay cuts. What would be the impact, just off the top of your head, what would be the impact on the organisation of a recruitment freeze, do you imagine?
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to complete part of our work program. That would be the reality. We've got some key positions that we need to fill to be able to deliver annual plans, annual reports, strategies. That would be, and also if we were to do a pay freeze as well, then we may well lose people.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've concluded the CEO's report. So briefly, I think the last item is my mayoral report. So it is there. The penguins. No, I mean, yay! I'm sorry that came out. I must have got my vowels muddled. So yeah, very briefly, I don't have anything to add. It's there for information. If people someone's prepared, I'll move its receipt. So councillor Mailing. So I'll move the receipt of my report. However, I'll do it in 2 parts. So just the receipt of my report, and we have a subsequent item under my report that reflects. So, do you want to pop that up? So if we just move the seconding the receipt, councillor Mailing, seconded.
Yep.
Councillor Tufnell, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, the second item, who wants to just briefly speak to that? It's reasonably self-explanatory. So this came out of the joint shareholders. I don't know, where is Mike?
I'll just comment on your report.
You may comment while we find Mike.
Yep. Just, it was interesting when you talk about recruiting, and recently I attended a function that the Mayor was at with Becca, and the number of young qualified people that I'm seeing coming here from Auckland. And I know that Richard has recruited a couple, and I met 2 other young engineers, and they're both living in Richmond. Because I directed one of them to visit Rabbit Island because he'd been here 6 months and he hadn't been there yet. But it was just the ability that they can now buy a house. The ones that were here could walk to work, and the house they were buying was so much more than what they had in Auckland. So there is reputation and opportunities, and I've got a son who's moved back here from Auckland as well. They end up with a better standard of living. The pay might not be quite as high, but they're better off in the end. And I think that's something we should not underestimate.
I definitely think the non-financial packages that are being offered, and that's actually a central government thing as well, they're offering a lot of flexibility and things as well as also offering more money in many cases. But it's as much the other recommendations. Mike, items 2 and 3, could you please speak to those?
That's through you, Mr. Mayor. At the Joint Shareholders Committee meeting earlier this week, the committee considered a request, in fact, considered the placement of directors for Nelson Airport Limited. We have a number of directors to replace. That's within the authority and delegations to the Joint Shareholders Committee. What was desired, however, was to allow for an overlap of directors for training and development purposes. And that's not provided for in the constitution of Nelson Airport Limited. It is, by the way, provided in the constitution of Port Nelson. And so what this resolution does is simply gives us, or at least gives the mayor, the ability to vote council shares in Nelson Airport Limited to amend the constitution to change from having 5 directors to having a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 6. That change will allow the transfer of knowledge and skills, because they'll run with 1 additional director for a short period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond. Open for questions, Councillor Greening.
So I thought we had a constitutional change a few years ago that enabled, because we had a problem with, I think, someone leaving and then not filling, or filling and not leaving on the port. And I thought that constitution change had occurred. And I thought we'd also done it to Nelson Airport. So we allowed.
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
No.
No, the only changes were made to Port Nelson Limited. There'll be further changes to the constitution as a result of the holding company proposal should that proceed. This is simply an interim measure that allows the directors to be appointed and to manage the transition at this time.
So this wording is, or this proposal is similar, identical to the constitutional change that's in the port's current constitution?
That is, the port's slightly more complex because it's got some statutory provisions around directors and what they can or can't do when the directors fall below 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that because when you read that, you think, oh God, they're going to have 6 directors on the board now rather than 5. So it's quite clear that it's a transitional period, not a permanent 6 directors.
This is a permanent change to the constitution. So currently, that constitution provides.
Yep. So that's correct. I think what's the clarity that you're seeking is in the recommendation that went to joint shareholders about the appointment of 2 directors, which is clearly about a transition and relates to the chair and the appointment of the 2 people. So while the constitution enables it to happen, and that's a permanent change, as it was for Port Nelson, it's not anticipated that they would run with 6 directors on a permanent basis.
Yes,
so that's reflected in the joint shareholders recommendations re-director appointment, not in this item.
So do we need to make sure that even though we're allowing 6, that we're noting that it is for transitional purposes up to 6?
Mike?
No, that's the appointment of directors and the number of directors is a matter for the Joint Shareholders Committee. They have the delegated authority. So this simply changes the constitution to allow up to 6 directors, and whether it's 6 permanently, that's not the intention. That will be a decision for the Joint Shareholders Committee.
So I'm just trying to make sure that Joint Shareholders Committee have some policy around that they're not going to then go, oh, well, we can appoint 6 permanently because there's no direction for us not to.
Like officer report and paper to the Joint Shareholders Committee earlier this week clearly indicated that the increasing the number of directors to a maximum of 6 was to allow the transition of a new director onto the board.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. On that basis and that explanation, thank you, Councillor Greening. I'm happy to move items 2 and 3. Seconded, Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And now we move to the item in relation to Port Tarakoe and the Penguins. So this is a late report which we undertook to receive at the start of the meeting. Nick, I think it's under your name. Mike, you seem keen to, no, probably not. Nick, over to you to introduce the item and I'll come to Councillor Hill.
Tēnā koutou e aku rangatira. Before we begin, I'd just like to thank Councillors Hill and Butler, Grant Knowles and Kura Stafford from Ngāti Tama for their hard work in this this issue is quite a big issue for the local community. So Thank you very much. I'll take the report as read and the recommendations. Here, Pata, are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. I'll come to Councillor Hill.
Through you, Chair, thank you, Nick, and thank you for your support of the panel. And just to reiterate thanks as Chair to the panel members, and acknowledge the the reasonable amount of interest in this on the Bay. I've got an initial question in terms of the report under 1.1. The proposed fence was approved and included in the unsuccessful PGF submission. What was the nature of the approval?
I guess my understanding is that it was included in the business case to the PGF submission, but I'm not too sure what I guess because it was included, it had, I think MKM had approved it in principle, but I'm not too sure what other approvals went through at the time.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to clarify what this was meaning. So I think that it was presented in the business case, and the business case was accepted or adopted, perhaps as an implicit, despite the reserve and the process of consultation required. I guess it's implicit that it was accepted to some degree.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, in the proposal had a number of items that were subject to further process, for example, resource consents and the likes. And so the approval of it was of a fence, and it was approval to set aside that area for the purposes which we're discussing today. So what would have happened had the funding proposal been successful with the Provincial Growth Fund? There would have been a series of processes, including the one that we're completing today, to give effect to that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just like to say just some comments. Often I think with issues that come up for council, there are often people for, people against. Hopefully some people in the middle who can work something through that's workable. But often there's a comment about, look, there's just no issue here. And that's one of the things that's come up in terms of this. Professor Cochrane is the sort of one of the national experts in this area of little blue penguins. And he's involved in a number of areas, colonies throughout New Zealand. And it's been helpful to have him submit and to be able to ask questions of him. One of the other things that gets said is, education will do it, and signage, and humans can, cohabitate pretty easily with penguins. In fact, we've got signage on the gate at the moment, big signs saying no dogs, and people still are taking dogs through. I do have a question about which putea, which funding pot the money would come out of to build it, should the resolution be put and passed that council fund. So that is one question I have. And just to say that that whatever setup we have there in terms of public access needs to be really manageable and easily manageable, I think. And just to note that there has been an adjustment from what was in the business case that the Penguin Trust put to council originally in terms of fence. If you've got the map in front of you there, the fence initially sort of went from that one on the right-hand side all the way up to the one at the top, or actually further back down on that, then all the way around the purple area. So what we agreed as a panel actually was recommended was that it be reduced, which is what was in our report. And yesterday we received this from the Penguin Trust to say actually they'd be satisfied that would be adequate. So my inclination is to move the resolution with the adjustment to it being what's here. So concerns in the public are around public access and don't fence me out of anywhere. and the visual impact of it. So I certainly support those two ideas, and that what we're going to end up with here is significantly reduced in terms of cost, visual impact, still will provide reasonable protection. Do have a question about who pays.
Okay, thank you. So you're happy to move? Subject to clarification about who
Subject
pays
to,
and the changes which are reflected
yes,
in that resolution. Who pays?
Through Mr. Chair, that's normally the question I get.
It is.
Who pays?
Surprisingly.
The recreational aspects of Port Tarakoe are recovered through rates. So there'll be a slight increase in the rates, and that'll be built into the 22-23 rate strike.
Thank you. Satisfactory clarification?
yes. Could we consider that as perhaps the installation is met half and half between the trust and council? Or I guess that's something I want us to discuss, I suppose.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would be doable. It simply it doesn't affect the resolution. We would provide for it on the rates, and then as the Port Tarakoe recreational component of the rate, which is relatively small, it's usually $20,000 or $30,000 a year. I think at the time, and we could continue with negotiations with the Penguin Trust about them contributing to the some of the installation costs. In the longer term, it is likely to be the maintenance costs of the fence that are more significant than the capital cost and installation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So it's been moved, Councillor Hill. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I'm prepared to second it. Just in relation to paying for the fence, I think that because it's now going to be going down onto the rocks in 4 places as opposed to 2, which was the original proposal, it may well not be any cheaper. But we don't actually have an estimate of the cost of the revised map, so we actually don't know. We've actually got no idea how much that will cost. So what I just think that it was agreed originally that it would come out of the that port funding. So
okay, thank you. Nick.
I'm actually prepared to support that rather than ask the Penguin Trust to actually start to pay for installation. They've already paid for the fence materials.
Okay, thank you. Nick.
Just as an estimate, the original fence was estimated at about $10,000 to install, but at that time it was about 70 metres. So it's now about 20 metres. The unknown was the amount of drilling that would have to occur for the posts, and so it depends on the amount of drilling really. But that, I think, considerably less than 10,000 is probably my guess.
Okay, thank you. Further questions, Councillor Mackenzie? So it's been moved and seconded, just so we're all clear.
That's good. I just wanted to make a couple of points. Having gone online and read the petition comments, I guess we had this discussion maybe some meetings ago as to why it wouldn't have been possible to have made this a decision for the Golden Bay Community Board rather than for council. So I just raised that. And I don't know, the thing that I'm worried about is actually administration of the permits. And so if you've got a lot of opposition in terms of that, I'm worried about how much time will be consumed in administering the permits and who makes the decisions, and whether that's going to be a subsequent discussion that we'll have to have.
Okay, thank you for sharing those concerns. Councillor Greening.
Yeah, I share similar concerns around the permits. I suppose it all comes back to the heart of the question, which is what is the problem we're trying to address? And are we overkilling, for want of a bad term, the problem. I'm interested in the observation made on 455, which was the panel further discussed, and I think it's the fourth bullet point down. That deciding to move from the current interim measure to a permanent fence needs to be done with updated data from the trust. There was no clear updated data submitted regarding dog attacks and penguin fatalities. So I suppose the heart of the question is, do we have a problem? Is there a mortality thing or is there not? Because this does seem overkill if there's no mortality.
Who's answering this question? Well, Nick, firstly.
Most of the evidence currently is anecdotal, to be honest. There are stories from the Penguin Group. There are counter stories from others. The evidence provided at the hearing by penguin experts, Professor Cochrane, was that that is a significant issue, and it also will be not so much the mortality, but the effect on nesting or birds returning to feed their fledglings. So his view really was at times it's very difficult to quantify this unless you put a lot of effort into cameras, but his view is that keeping dogs out and keeping visitors out of the nests at certain times of the year is probably a good thing to do.
So yeah, I really don't want this. This should be pretty straightforward. So, Councillor Greening.
So I suppose what I'm trying to get to the heart of is there was no evidence of mortality. The issue we're trying to address, and what I'm sensing here is what Professor Cochrane wants is actually no one accessing this area to spook the penguins or whatever.
So can we clarify that question? Because I think I took that from that Mr. Cochrane is actually happy with this proposal. Yeah, so just so we're clear, what's Mr. Cochrane's view on this proposal?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yes, the Penguin Committee are happy with what's been proposed.
Pretty much all I need to know.
So they're wanting not to protect the penguins from dogs and pests, they're wanting to protect the penguins from people accessing the area.
So I think just to be clear, it appears that both the Penguin Trust and the expert penguin person are happy with the recommendation that we have for the range of reasons that have been outlined around nesting, mortality, dogs, people interacting with them. So I think all we need to know is that that's the position, right? They are happy.
Well, I want to know what the purpose is, and I'm getting mixed stories on the purpose.
No,
is it mortality, or they don't want people there? Because the fisher people want to access the area to go fishing, and they can go through a fence. Anyone can walk over a fence and do their fishing. Are they being told not to?
Look, Councillor, I don't.
These are questions all raised.
It's pretty clear.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
These questions all raised by the submitters, of course, and one of the main things that's happened is that the Penguin Trust has been the penguins arrived there naturally quite a lot of years ago, and actually we heard in a submission from someone who sailed in their yacht, noticed them, let Doc know. First they knew about a penguin colony. Doc started putting in wooden boxes with the community over years, so it sort of started that way. The Penguin Trust came in and put a lot of publicity around, so really made something of it to get support, I guess. But what's happened is that the motorhome people who park up at the port, quite a few seem to have dogs, but on their website, they've said, yeah, you can go and visit the penguins. So what's happened is that people have rocked up into the colony with torches at night and dogs and kids and looking for the penguins. So it's more a level of disturbance that's happening. There are two women who work down there on the arm a lot. They reckon they've put in hundreds of hours down there, and they chat with people and people walking through to fish and trying to educate people about it. But they've recorded 50 incidences of disturbance in terms of, we've got a photo of a dog's head inside the hole into the box, children standing on boxes, bait getting cut off on them, whole boxes being moved, lids lifted, all of that's been going on. So what they're wanting to do is just to limit that business of dogs going in and a lot of people. And we've been pretty keen in the community to allow public access, so a gate in terms of permit I'm imagining a combination lock, people get the combination and they wander through and go fishing. So it's not just about mortality, but it's around the level of disturbance as more and more people have come into the colony area. I could add that, you know, in terms of that level of opposition, it happens, doesn't it, if a petition is initiated, that people on the other side, they may well have got, we don't know, you know, hundreds of people sign it. You don't know. So that when one petition is submitted and the other team haven't done that, I think it presents something that's it doesn't have balance to it. But those are the issues that we're trying to limit, and I think this really reduced amount of fence will achieve that in terms of you can go through to go fishing, but you can't rock up with your dog. I do have issues around the visual impact, and I think if it can be as low as possible and planted up in the front, that's good. Yeah, but so to my first point that I made earlier, is there an issue? Yes, there is.
That's a clarification. So on that front, and following up on the earlier discussion about the permits, what is the control then? Because you said, oh, you can still rock over the fence for fishing. So I'm just wanting to understand, are we looking to restrict only through this permit process a particular time in the year that they can go fishing? They can go fishing anytime they want. They will get a permit, in which case, why are we having a permit system if anyone can just rock over the fence?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mike, whoever, save me.
So the permit system hasn't been fully designed. We use permits to allow access to some of our forestry areas for hunting and other purposes. The importance of the languages used within the resolution is to indicate there will be an administrative approach, that you'll be able to approach council if you have good reason and you have been educated about how to behave around the penguins, then you are likely to be given access to the area. And that primarily was to address, in my view, the concerns that were raised by the regular users of that arm, primarily for fishing. But it allows flexibility for council to manage the area and any impact on the penguins.
Okay, thank you. Are we all clear?
Yes.
Right. Is there any further comments?
I don't understand. Well, I can appreciate the theoretical and conceptual approach here. I do take a kind of a pragmatic approach to this and go, where's the enforcement of this? Look at all the cost. Is the cost benefit worth it for a permit system? Is the fence really just a good signal to indicate don't rush in? So it will restrict dogs, and people will just jump over the fence anyway, but it will restrict the dogs.
Okay. Or
is there an opening that you just open up?
Councillor Creening, I understand your concerns. I think they echo some of the concerns that Councillor Mackenzie has over we're faced with a decision to make. It seems relatively straightforward. We've got it moving seconded. It will be interesting to see how the administration of it pans out. But I think we just need to move on with putting a resolution and seeing what the council's position is. Does the mover want a right of reply?
Do, thank you, Chair. Hard to imagine, isn't it? But just 2 points. One is that to note the significance of the compromise in terms of the issues around public access, visual impact, protecting penguins. This is a significant compromise to what was initially proposed. And in terms of the language of permit, it relates to the Reserves Act. So we're imagining a combination padlock. And it will reduce the amount of people bustling into there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? The resolution is carried. We now need to move to go into committee for the last item on the agenda. Move Councillor Bryant, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Sorry, Councillor Ogilvie.
I was going to ask, is there a need to go into committee for this particular item?
Mike, that is a relatively good question, actually.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the rationale for going into committee is to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, and councillors may well have a conversation on performance or other matters. So we believe it's most appropriate to have the conversation in committee.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Who's speaking to this item? Sorry. Yep. Okay. We are in confidential.
So